Very good evening. So, my purpose, thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank All India Ophthalmological Society for giving me this opportunity to talk in Teachers Talk in UVA session. So, my motive for this subject would be to impart a basic knowledge to the postgraduates and the DNBs so that they have a clear mind to approach any case of intermediate uveitis. So the first question that pops up in our mind is that whether it's an intermediate uveitis or the pars planitis, the nomenclature. So the history begins with cyclitis by Fuchs in 1908, and it gradually evolved to intermediate uveitis by the IUSG group, that is International Uveitis Study Group, in 1987. So we have all heard about IUSG definition and Sun Working Group definition. Basically, they all tell that these are idiopathic inflammatory syndrome that involves anterior vitreous, peripheral retina, and the ciliary body. There could be minimal or no anterior segment or chorioretinal signs. There should be a presence of peripheral vascular sheathing, but that should not change the classification. So what is then this pars planitis? Is it a different entity? So basically, in the recent era, IUSG has come up, Sun Group has come up with another classification, that is intermediate uveitis, pars planitis type, intermediate uveitis, non-pars planitis type, and intermediate uveitis associated with multiple sclerosis. So basically, pars planitis is a form of intermediate uveitis when there is an absence of any associated infection or a systemic disease. A brief note on epidemiology. In India, it is found to be first 9.5, gradually increased to 17.4, and now it has been documented to have 30% epidemiology. In children, it is approximately 25%, usually presents in teens to 40s of age. Bilaterality is seen in 70 to 90%, and there is no gender or race predilection. Little bit about the etiopathogenesis. The exact etiology is not known. Basically, it is a T cell mediated disease, and an unknown antigen is known to be an initiator. It could either be an infectious antigen like in syphilis, or could be an autoimmune like in multiple sclerosis and sarcoidosis. Basically, vitreous, as we all know, constitutes type 2 collagen, and this collagen has been noted to be an autoantigen in some patients. So these are basically 95% of the vitreous cells, and of them 35 to 90% are CD4. The second most common is the macrophages. So pathology, we see two terms, that is snowball and snowbank. As can be seen here, the white arrow shows snowball. They are composed of epithelioid cells and multinucleated giant cells. Snowbanks histologically are collapsed vitreous, blood vessels, and the fibroglial cells. That includes fibrous astrocytes, scattered inflammatory cells, and lymphocytes. Symptoms: floaters, mild blurring and mild photophobia, very uncommonly pain and redness. Signs: from anterior to posterior, conjunctiva mild congestion could be present, anterior chamber no or minimal reaction due to spillover, cells and flare, KPs and posterior synechia could be present. The hallmark, however, remains the vitritis. So we will learn about vitritis. It consists of vitreous cells and vitreous haze or flare. So cells, it is practically not possible, but for theory purpose we have to learn the grading. Then comes the vitreous flare. As can be seen in the down photographs, 0 means there is no flare. You can clearly see the disc and the blood vessels. 0.5, very little haze, but the details are visible. 1%, if there is clear optic disc and vessels, but there is hazy nerve fiber layer. 2 plus, hazy optic disc and hazy vessels. However, 3 plus, only optic disc is visible, and 4 plus, even the optic disc is not visible. So coming to the signs, as we discussed, snowballs and snowbanks. So snowballs are seen something like this: white, roundish, yellowish white roundish balls like structures, especially in the inferior quadrant. And when these exudates accumulate inferiorly, then they form something like banks. So this is snow banks, and it has a tendency to move 360 around the periphery and could be seen in inferior, superior, temporal, and any quadrant. Here we have to see that retinal changes are also possible, like tortuosity in arterioles, venules, sheathing of peripheral veins, neovascularization, and even retinal detachment. Why? Because these snowballs, as we learned in the histology, contains fibroglial structures. So that can contract and cause retinal detachment there also. So now we come to diagnostic criteria. How do we now diagnose this to be a case of intermediate uveitis? Basically, vitreous cells, one. Second, snowballs and snow banking. And third, in chronic cases, sometimes complications like cystoid macular edema, band-shaped keratopathies, occlusio pupillae, they can point towards intermediate uveitis. After diagnosing a case of intermediate uveitis, what all do we investigate? First, it starts with ocular investigation. So you do an FFA, you can see a sheathing of blood vessels around the periphery or throughout the fundus, and you should do a B-scan ultrasonography that can show the number of vitreous echoes, the vitritis, that is the hallmark. Then coming to ultrasound biomicroscopy, in cases of chronic uveitis, when the pupil is very small, you cannot see the posterior structure, then this imaging comes very handy and can show presence of pars plana membranes. OCT, very important tool because we can detect cystoid macular edema, that is the main cause of visual impairment in these cases. Coming to the systemic investigation, I won't go details because if you suspect a particular disease, you go ahead with the particular investigation. So if you suspect TB, you do a Montoux and radiology. If you do suspect sarcoidosis, you go ahead with the simultaneous systemic evaluation. Coming to the complications, n number of complications starting from cystoid macular edema, cataract, glaucoma, hypertony, calcific band-shaped keratopathy, especially in juvenile idiopathic arthritis, associated uveitis, and RD as we discussed. So now we have done with diagnosis and the complication. Now comes to the treatment. It starts with medical and surgical. So it constitutes of corticosteroids, immunomodulatory therapy, now recently biological therapies, and if you have a spillover anterior uveitis, can go with topical treatment. Surgical treatment are very rarely done nowadays. It includes cryopexy, pars plana vitrectomy, and surgery. I won't go into details because of the time constraints. So we have all learned about the Kaplan's 4-stage approach, which is very historical. Now it has come to modified Kaplan's 5-step approach by Forrester. So what he says that first you try with periocular steroids, especially if it is a unilateral condition, and then if IVTA is an alternative, if it fails, or is it if it is a bilateral condition, then you go with the oral corticosteroid. If both the conditions fails, then you go ahead with the systemic immunosuppressive with immunomodulatory therapy. If everything fails, then you can go with cryotherapy or indirect laser photocoagulation to the peripheral retina. If all the above treatment fails to control the inflammation, then only pars plana vitrectomy has to be resorted. So to in nutshell, first step, you have to rule out whether it is an infectious, whether it is an immune mediated pathology, or it's an masquerade, and then you see whether it is an unilateral condition, if it is associated with cystoid macular edema, or there is no cystoid macular edema. If there is no cystoid macular edema, you can go ahead with the topical treatment with corticosteroids and NSAIDs. If it's an cystoid macular edema and active unilateral, you can go ahead with the posterior subtenon. If there is a good response, you can continue with that after 1 month interval. However, if you require 3 or more such injections, you can consider an intravitreal dexamethasone implant. If there is no or minimal response with the PST first injection, then you can go ahead with IVT as an alternative treatment. But if you see a snow bank, you can very well go ahead with cryotherapy. If you see if it does not respond, then you can go ahead with vitrectomy. But if recurrence happens, then systemic corticosteroids. However, if you see a bilateral condition at the beginning, you should start with systemic corticosteroids. However, if the patient does not respond well, or if cannot be maintained on 5 milligram of prednisolone, then you can switch to immunomodulatory therapy and then to biologic and can consider vitrectomy. So now when should we stop the treatment as well? So if there is no clinically significant vitritis, there is no leakage on FFA, or there is no CME and OCT for at least more than 3 months, then you can consider to stop the treatment. Then the most important thing is the cataract surgery. When do we consider cataract? We cannot go ahead with any intraocular surgery in this condition when the inflammation is active. So inflammation should be well controlled as much as possible, especially 3 months minimum. In cases of known recurrent diseases or with chronic CME, Ozurdex injection can be combined. Oral corticosteroids are usually started 4 to 7 days before the surgery, and if there is any contraindication, periocular injection can be considered. A subconjunctival injection should be injected at the end, and intensive topical corticosteroid mediatics should be started after the surgery. So at the conclusion, I would say, if you say a vitreous cells, no banks, no balls on vitreous cells, you should go ahead with an ancillary imaging, FFA or OCT, and a thorough systemic evaluation. With this, you should be able to clinch a diagnosis of intermediate uveitis and a proper treatment algorithm as discussed. And I hope after this, all the postgraduates should be able to approach any patient coming with intermediate uveitis.